Hey, welcome into another episode of the Fat Guy Podcast. I'm the Fat Guy. Most people call me Brett. I appreciate you taking time to listen today. This podcast is my effort to share the secret. I really can't put it any other way. A person that's been fat since I was a kid, knew my whole life that I was different, that it wasn't just, I needed to eat less and move more. I knew that it wasn't that I had bad willpower. I knew that it wasn't because I was weak or lazy, because that didn't apply to any aspect of my life. I've never been lazy. Well, about some things I'm lazy, let's be honest. But anything I've ever set my mind to, I accomplished it. That didn't fit me. And people tried to put that over on me. Oh, you just need more willpower. You're just this, that, and the other. And, starting around 2013, I started researching and really getting serious about losing weight. And it was a long journey. It started with some product, and then it moved to, different kinds of nutrition that varied from vegetarian to raw vegan to whole food vegan to keto. And once I arrived at keto and saw and felt like a normal person for the first time in my life. And don't get me wrong, I had success on vegan. I did. I lost weight on vegan. It was a lot of work though. It was nearly impossible to travel. You had to pack up all your food and carry it with you. You could easily find yourself in places that with nothing to eat, and you had to eat all the time. I ate, and at the time, I thought that's why it was great. At that time, I was like, man, being vegan is amazing because I can eat all day long and lose weight. Now that I, been keto over a year, and I see how much different it is to never be hungry and never want to eat, it's so much better. You think you want to eat all day and you think it's great, but that's really not the way to live. Your life is consumed with eating at that point. And so, that's where we've arrived at where we are today. I thank you for listening. A disclaimer, I'm not a doctor. I'm going to talk about some medical things here, so please don't be confused in any way, shape, form, or fashion that I've given medical advice, because I'm not. I'm simply giving an opinion. For medical advice, you need to consult with a doctor, okay? And I'm certainly not prescribing specific weight loss advice to you. I'm sharing my experiences, my opinions, my thoughts, and my experiences with dealing with other people. Subscribe on social media. Our username is Fat Guy Podcast, no matter what social media platform you like best. And wherever you are consuming this podcast right now, you can subscribe, whether that be iTunes, Apple Podcasts, whether it be the Google Play Store. If you don't understand any of that, you just saw a link somewhere and clicked it and you don't understand any of that, the easiest thing to do is download the Spreaker app, Spreaker, Spreaker. Once you download that app, you can search for Fat Guy Podcast, hit the little heart button, follow us, like us, love us, subscribe to us, and you'll get notifications about new episodes, and you can easily scroll back and see all previous episodes. And my last disclaimer before we get into today's content it's a request really, is for you to please, if you understand how to leave feedback on Apple Podcast, even if you don't, and you can take 5 seconds to figure out how, please go rate this podcast, because that's how people find it. Apple shares your podcast with more people if it's been rated. So, if you've gotten anything out of this podcast, you've been helped by it, go to iTunes, Apple Podcast, find this podcast, and click that you want to review it, and give us 5 stars and say how it's helped you or what you like about it. I'd really appreciate it. You won't just be helping me. It will help me, obviously. It help me spread the word to more people. But you never know who else it'll help that may stumble across the podcast and it help them. And all this is free, and I provide so much free content to help people. It's my passion. And one other quick thing. I'm about to start something very exciting. I'm about to start a week-long free keto challenge. I'm going to be putting that together soon. It'll be a complete 1-week game plan for anybody wanting to start keto, that wants their hand held, that wants somebody that's been through it right beside them. And we're going to do it as a big group so we can all support each other. That's going to be coming very soon. So be listening up for future podcasts for info on that. And, of course, follow us on social media because we'll be announcing it on there as well. So I'm doing this podcast today because of two people that I've talked to this week. I'm not going to name their names because, once again, we're talking about medical issues. And number two, I didn't ask their permission. But I will tell you that one of them is related to me. And I've talked about her health turnaround before and how much she's improved her health by going keto. And the other one is a person that I helped as well who had issues with diabetes. And both of them gave me doctor's reports today, either yesterday or today. And I found amusing what their doctors told them. So that's why the headline is, don't let your doctor kill you with his horrible advice. I'm not claiming that keto is a cure-all, although there's enormous amounts of evidence out there that pretty much any chronic condition you're suffering from today, especially if it's a foodborne condition, which most all of our conditions are, keto will help it, if not completely reverse it. And this ranges from diabetes to irritable bowel to high blood pressure to, heart disease to cancer and all kind of other things. So again, it's not a cure, but there's so much studies and information coming in, anecdotally and otherwise, that show, I think relatively conclusively, that keto can at least help with many, if not most, ills of the world, of the health variety, especially first world countries like America, where we're just overstuffed on processed carbohydrates. With that being said, I don't think anything's a cure-all, but boy, is it helping a ton of people. So I don't know why doctors are so resistant. Well, I do know part of it. I know part of it is because doctors don't want to get sued, and doctors have something called standard of care. And this is the well-established protocol for treating certain things. And if they deviate from it and you die, they can be sued for malpractice. Even if a doctor believes with all their heart that keto is the best thing for your diabetes, they really can't recommend you do that without risking their livelihood. Because, and again, the chances of going keto killing you is slim to none. It's as healthy or healthier than any other way of eating. But you can never say that somebody couldn't die by changing their diet, or, they just die anyway. They were going to die anyway, and they changed their diet, and they somehow, all these things. Doctors pay a ton of money for insurance every year, and it's because of issues just like this. So doctors are pretty much forced to follow standard of care unless you find a really great doctor who cares more about actually helping you than about risking being sued. And there are some great doctors out there like that. But to get into it, the first one is a woman who I've been helping for a while, but she just got back from another doctor's appointment. Now, I started helping her a little over 3 months ago. It was the first time she reached out to me. And she started doing keto. And I've answered several questions for her along the way. She shared health updates with me along the way. And I've actually shared a few of those on my Facebook page that she allowed me to share. But she updated me today. And it's been long enough that she's got a good A1C back. And if you're a type 2 diabetic, you know what the HbA1c is. Anyway, she's down in the normal range. She's down at 5.6 now. 5.6 is her HbA1c. And it was almost 9 when she started. So for folks that don't know about type 2 diabetes, that won't mean anything to you, but folks that do understand it, see how crazy that was. So she has that and several other tests this week at her doctor. And then her doctor tells her that the numbers are great, and the doctor is so proud of her progress and accomplishments. And she's off the metformin now. She doesn't do the metformin anymore. Don't need to take that anymore, blah, blah, blah. And then the doctor follows it up with, but you can't keep eating that high level of fat, and you need to eat more carbs. You have to have carbs to be healthy. And so you got to eat more carbs. And so she sends me this message, and I'm just dying laughing. I'm like, so what your doctor told you basically is go back to the diet you were eating before that caused type 2 diabetes, and abandon this one that you've been doing that reversed your type 2 diabetes. It's essentially what your doctor's telling you. I mean, it was just mind blown, just flabbergasted. The other story is a relative of mine, and she's suffered from several health issues, but one of them was kidney disease. Kidney disease to the point that she was told a lot how scary it was, how serious it is, and oh boy, you got to watch your protein. And boy, I'll tell you, I give her all the credit in the world for taking a huge leap of faith and trying keto when doctors and everybody was saying, oh, it's high protein, it's going to ruin your kidneys, it's going to be horrible, blah, 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 blah. And when you're, especially when you're not a young person, young people are stupid. And if you're young, I don't mean that in an insulting way, because I was young and stupid too. You'll just take on the world with no regard for anything. You're like, oh, keto? Yes, I'll do it. The older you get in life, you start being more careful, and you have to really evaluate, well, wow, my doctor's telling me this protein is going to ruin my kidney disease and make it worse, and I could die. I mean, you really have to think about that. And I give her all the credit in the world for deciding to try it, and she did. And even through doing the keto diet, her doctor would continue. She had one or two doctor's visits, I think. And her doctors were warning her about this. No, you can't eat that. It's high protein. You can't be eating this protein. You got to eat off that diet, blah, blah, blah. And so she had test results back this week. And lo and behold, her kidney numbers are good. All these different levels of markers where they gauge it are good. And she's, reversing. The trend is reversing now rather than progressing worse. It's progressing better. All these things. And she's lost this weight, and she feels better. And she had irritable bowel syndrome. She doesn't have that anymore. I mean, if you compare probably how she feels now as compared to how she felt, 3 or 4 months ago, or however long it's been, she has to be feeling like so remarkably different. It's not even funny. So after the doctor sees all that and tells her how much better her numbers are and how, all this great news, the doctor proceeds to say the same thing that my other person that I told you about, their doctor told them. So, you've been doing good, but look, you can't be eating that high level of fat, and you're going to have some carbs. You just have to have you got to up your level of carbs to be healthy. And this is the carb thing is especially funny to me. I understand why doctors are scared of fat, because we've been programmed and brainwashed since the 70s, and Ansel Keys' fake 7 countries study that he somehow pushed over as a sham on the world, that saturated animal fats are bad for you. I can understand a doctor saying that, but why any doctor would tell you that you have to have carbs is beyond me. There are no essential carbs. There are essential amino acids, which are proteins. Those are proteins that you have to eat or you will die. And there are essential fatty acids, which is essential fats that you must eat or you will die. But there are no essential carbs. There's not one essential carb that you must eat or you will die. Your body has a process in place that's perfectly natural, where when it needs a carbohydrate, it creates it. You don't have to eat it. And so if your body needs 10 carbs today, it'll make 10. If your body needs 20 carbs today, it'll make 20. If your body needs 30 carbs today, it'll make 30. So this whole idea that you got to up your carbs, blah, 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 blah. I tell you, I've heard it so many times. It's just laughable at this point. Doctors would rather tell you to go back to the diet that caused the problems you had to start with, rather than encourage you to continue the diet that is reversing the problems you had. It's mind-blowing to me. And so here's where you find yourself. And I've found myself here with doctors many times. And look, I'm very fortunate to have an amazing doctor. I have an amazing doctor. Doesn't mean I agree with him all the time. But I have an amazing doctor and amazing nurses and all that stuff. So I'm very fortunate. But you get yourself into this situation where you have to judge what I'm doing and how I'm feeling versus what my doctor is telling me. And this is hard for a lot of people because doctors will scare you. Oh, you can't eat in that high level of fat. You're going to have a heart attack, they'll tell you. Or, well, that's going to make your cholesterol go through the roof. You're going to die with heart disease. And there's literally almost no evidence now to support that. Almost all the evidence that's ever been presented for this heart health hypothesis, which is based around saturated fats, has nearly been completely debunked. Especially the cholesterol part specifically. The only stats you need to know for cholesterol, and there's a ton of them that refute this whole high cholesterol causes heart disease and heart attacks thing. There's tons of studies out there that refute it. But the biggest one to me is when you look at a population study of all the people who died in the emergency room or in the hospital from a heart attack, and you look at their cholesterol levels, most of people who die from heart attacks have normal cholesterol. Let's just let that sink in. The majority, now I'm not saying half or close, I'm saying the majority, most people who die from a heart disease have normal cholesterol. You don't need any other evidence than that to know that the cholesterol in this heart hypothesis is a bunch of bunk. It's a bunch of junk. Your great grandpa, your grandma ate fatback and lard, and they weren't dying from heart disease. This only started after the Industrial Revolution, where, people did still continue to eat lard and fatback and stuff like that. But all of a sudden, all these processed carbs were thrown in, and that's where stuff went awry. So, look, I know that it's hard. It's hard when you see a doctor and they tell you something and you want to trust them and believe them. But let me tell you something about most doctors. And I'm not lumping all doctors in this category. So if you know a doctor that's different, or you just happen to be a doctor listening, I'm not downing you or your profession. Doctors receive virtually zero training about nutrition. Doctors are amazing when it comes to fixing a broken bone, a cracked vertebrae. You need your spleen removed. Your toe got cut off and you need to sew it back on. Doctors are insanely gifted and talented and well trained for these traumatic situations. But when it comes to health and foodborne illnesses, which type 2 diabetes is, which heart disease is, which stroke is, which arthritis for the most part is, which the list goes on and on and on and on and on. Obesity is. All these things are foodborne illnesses. They're illnesses caused by what you eat. When it comes to these kind of illnesses, most doctors don't know jack about what caused it or how to fix it. They got a bunch of pills they want you to take. None of those pills have been shown to extend human life. Statins being the primary one. If your doctor has you on a statin, all I can tell you is go research statins. I've researched statins extensively, and the only evidence I can find in favor of statins is for people who have already had a heart attack. There does to be some small body of evidence that it may help prevent a reoccurrence of a heart attack. And notice that I diminished all that as much as I could. I acknowledge it, but I just diminish it. Most of your studies on statins, and here's where they trick you. They'll like look at heart disease and they'll say, well, heart disease was this, that, and the other. If you look at the all-cause mortality of people who take statins, they all die sooner. Look, don't take my word for it. And again, I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm just sharing with you my opinion. And so doctors may be able to nitpick here at this little piece of, and that's the other thing about studies. You can take studies and you can nitpick this piece of information and that piece of information, and you can put it together and make most studies kind of say whatever you want them to say. But I like to look at all-cause mortality. They'll do a study on heart disease and they'll nitpick this piece of data and that piece of data to show, oh, it helps heart disease. When what they should just look at is, we put people on statins, did more of them die? And in the case of statins, that is the case. People who are put on statins die more often than people who aren't put on statins. Now, it may not be heart disease. It may come in the form of cancer, it may come in the form of aneurysms. I forget the list. But it causes a lot of other things to go awry in the body. And my doctor has suggested this last time kind of suggested, time before last, hinted around on it and then said, nah, you don't need to take statins just yet, but we need to watch it. And this last time, I think I actually suggested statins. And I told him flat out, I'm not taking statins. I'm never taking statins. I'm never, ever taking statins. So, the biggest piece of advice I can tell you, and we went through this with my mother and her fight against ovarian cancer. Primarily me, and then secondarily her, because she did as much research as she could. She wasn't feeling well as much as I was, and then she didn't have quite the ability to understand the technical jargon quite as well as I did. But combined between us, I don't think there's any two more people on the planet who were more educated about ovarian cancer than we were. And my mom often commented that I could hold my own with any doctor that we ever talked to on talking about ovarian cancer. And I would catch them saying stuff that wasn't true, and I'd call them out on it. I did it several times. Our doctor up there in Birmingham, I called him out. One time made him mad. I just flat out called him and said, that's just wrong. I've read the research. I can pull up the research for you right now. And what's real funny is the one piece of research that I pulled up for him was actually conducted at UAB where he practiced. And that's the one that pissed him off. I think it hurt his feelings. I think he felt shame. He felt ashamed that that's something he should have known. Nevertheless, my point is that doctors aren't bad people, and I'm not trying to put doctors down. But doctors have to operate under a very narrow set of operating procedures. One, all goes back to what we started this podcast out with, and that's standard of care. And they risk their license, they risk getting sued, they risk all kind of things if they give you advice that is outside what's known as the standard of care. So if the standard of care is wrong, they still have to give you the standard of care advice to protect themselves. So that's the first thing you should know. The second thing you should know, even the most well-meaning doctors, the ones who may be willing to give you advice outside the standard of care, don't have the time to devote to staying up to date on the research. They just don't. I mean, they spent, 8, 10, 12 years of their life in school. They don't want to do school no more. They just want to doctor and make money and spend time with their families. They don't want to try to spend another 10 or 15 hours a week staying up to date on the latest research. And honestly, in a way, I don't blame them. Else they'd have no life. You take a person like me, I have no life. I don't have a life. I can spend 8, 10 hours a day on research, and I have. The first 2.5 years maybe that my mom had ovarian cancer, I made it a point to spend 6 to 8 hours every day on research for ovarian cancer. I knew everything you could know about it. I slacked off a little bit in the middle stages, but then back in the end, when it became obvious to me, even though it wasn't obvious to my mom, but it came obvious to me we'd enter final stages. And, God bless my mom for being optimistic and having faith and, not wanting, I think that's why she lasted so long, is because she really shouldn't last as long as she did. It's because she was optimistic and she didn't look at the bad, and she tried to ignore when things took a turn. And I was in there with her, encouraging her, but I'd see it coming, and I'd tell people, I'd be like, look. And I remember telling them, the December before she died, the next September, that we were entering the final stage, and that, whatever. Anyway, I don't want to get into that. I still want to get into that, but when we hit that stage, that's kind of the stage where I found keto, because my mom couldn't eat anymore. And so the whole food plant-based diet that we had her on, which I thoroughly believe contributed to some of her longevity when she probably should have expired earlier, no longer worked because there aren't enough calories in that kind of food, and she could not eat anymore. And that's when I had to dive back into research again, and that's when I found the ketogenic diet, and that's how I managed to get calories in her, and that's how I pulled her from the brink of death in January. And I understand that sounds egotistical and arrogant, so please, I don't mean it that way, but even my mom would tell you at that time, had we not found keto, and had we not found out how to get her 2,000 calories a day in a 16-ounce cup that she could drink, my mom would have died, because she was losing weight at a rapid pace. She had, a hole in I forget what the name of it is, a perforated bowel. And the odds of her ever healing from a perforated bowel were slim to none. And she couldn't eat. But yet, we actually had her back gaining weight, and she gained weight. And then our next trip to the oncologist, he told her that next trip and the next following 2 trips after that, she had the best blood work of any cancer patient he had ever worked with in his career. And that was from the keto concoction that I put together. Unfortunately, my mom's cancer situation continued to deteriorate. There wasn't a whole lot we could do about that because it was so advanced at that time. And so then she eventually got where she couldn't even tolerate the keto stuff anymore. And that pretty much began the end, which is how all cancers end. The cancer it just takes over. And anyway, I don't want to get into that again. My point is that I was proactive with her situation. I've always been proactive with my health. And look, I could die tomorrow from a heart attack. I could die tomorrow from cancer. I don't know. That doesn't mean I don't know what I'm talking about, though. That simply means I waited too late in life to start making changes, because I treated my body like a dumpster 90% of my life up until recently. And so I believe I got a shot maybe at overcoming it, but, I don't know. All right, so there we go. I don't know what you managed to glean from this podcast. I kind of went off the rails there at the end, but I want you to know this. You know your body. And if you're getting better, you have to really weigh that against the crappy advice your doctor is telling you and try to understand why your doctor would disagree with you. I think it's very important to understand why a doctor who can see that you're improving, can see with their own eyes that what you're doing is making you better, yet still tell you to do something different. I think it's important to understand why they would do that. Primary reason, standard of care and liability. They got to give you advice that falls within standard of care so they don't open themselves up to lawsuits or losing their license. And then number 2 is lack of time to research and understand the research that you yourself have time to study. Those are the 2 reasons. And I think it's very important that you put those reasons into context. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Subscribe on the social media of your choice. Fat Guy Podcast is the username. That includes Snapchat, by the way. I do Snap, sometimes a lot more than others, but I do Snap is one of my favorites. If you've subscribed on Apple Podcasts or the Google Play Store and you know how to leave a rating, please go rate the podcast. Please give us 5 stars and leave a comment and say, talk about what you've learned or how it's helped you or something, because the more ratings we get on, especially Apple Podcasts, the more ratings we get, the more Apple will share it with other people and the more we can get this word out. All right. And then the last thing I would ask you to do is share this on your Facebook page or share it on Twitter. Share this podcast. You never know whose life you will change. The main reason I know that is because that's how my life got changed. I found keto through a post I saw on social media. Have a fantastic day today. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you next time right here. Thanks so much.